Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
The world's gone mad. A terrorist attack by a suicide bomber, no less, on the Kerch Bridge, linking two parts of Russia, Crimea and the Russian mainland, is hailed everywhere by the Western political class and the Western media. Donald Trump is the only man in the world talking any sense. How crazy is that? Well, him and Elon Musk, the once and future owner of Twitter and my new best friend, and a British billionaire called John Codwell, who lives in a 60-room castle with his 10th wife, who may be Russian, may be Ukrainian, who knows, who cares, has announced that he is going to hit Putin where it hurts by switching off the heating in his own 60-bedroom mansion. I tell you, the world has gone crazy. Henry Kissinger is Mr. Peacenik. Well, listen in for the nuggets. On Wednesday, it's the relaunch of the midweek mother of all talk shows at 9 p.m. UK time. I'm going to keep saying that. 9 p.m. UK time on Wednesday. We are going into orbit and we intend to stay there longer than Sputnik, longer than Starlink, which seems to have broken down over the Ukrainian front line. And we can only do that if you spread the word, build the audience, and keep the sponsors on board. So fasten your seatbelts for the Open University of the Airwaves, the College of Knowledge, where there are no tuition fees and where you are encouraged to speak back to the teacher. Stay tuned for the next 2 hours. It's the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
It is though, isn't it? The world's turned upside down. All the liberals, progressives and leftists, as they describe themselves, are baying for more money, for more war. None of them are putting their own tin hats on and getting ready to go and fight in the front line with the poor bloody infantry of the Ukrainian armed forces. That they leave to deracinated mercenaries and the poor people of Ukraine. But the liberal and progressive media cannot cry more ravenously for more money, for more war in Ukraine. They are daily demanding new fronts and the stepping up of old ones. Donald Trump is the only man speaking sense. Just today, he said that somebody has to negotiate a peaceful ending to the conflict with Ukraine before we're all dragged into World War III, a nuclear war. I'm still quoting him. A nuclear war which would end life on this planet. They are all underestimating the power of nuclear. All of those were Donald Trump's words. But the opposite is coming out of the White House. Actually, Trump is being backed up by Elon Musk, who is now, after all, about to be the owner of Twitter, about which more later. He put out a poll which seemed to indicate that the great majority, despite the hyperactivity of the massive robot army of NATO and NAFO and all the other creeps and freaks that are in orbit around the NATO bureaucracy in Brussels, the defense ministries of the European governments. Never underestimate that. When you see a shoal of public opinion appearing to swim in one direction, keep reminding yourself that you are paying millions, tens of millions of public money in order to keep this robot army, which is determined to have you all think that opinion is swimming in the one direction. But Elon Musk's poll showed the opposite. It showed a big desire, a hunger actually, for an end to this conflict by negotiation, a conflict that need never have started and is about tomorrow to get very, very much worse. They can't get enough, the Liberals. They're staging provocation after provocation, all designed to entice Russia to up the ante so that they can persuade their own public that they need to up that ante too. We've had, of course, just in the last 24 hours, a terrorist attack, possibly by a suicide bomber, imagine, being cheered to the rafters in Western capitals, which, if it were happening at the hands of some Islamist, lunatic, fanatic, blood cultist, mass murderer, would be called just that. But because it happened on the Kerch Bridge and on Putin's birthday, it has been widely celebrated. And of course, the Russian State Council is meeting in the morning, and appropriate answers will be given by Moscow, and who knows, maybe also by Minsk, where there are massive troop movements going on right now in the Belarus, speeding towards the Ukrainian border, and it's only a 2-hour drive from that border to the Ukrainian capital, Kiev itself. The provocation, therefore, has worked in the way that the previous provocation last week has not worked. The biggest terrorist attack since 9/11, the American terror attack on the Nord Stream pipelines, which was an attack not on Russia but on Europe and in particular by Germany, actually failed. The gang that couldn't shoot straight only blew up one of the pipelines beyond repair, but the other pipeline is extant, and all that is required is for the German government to open the tap, as tens of thousands of demonstrators in Germany over the last weekend and this one are demanding. Mass demonstrations also in France against the Emperor Louis XVI, or 17th in this case, Emmanuel Macron. Mass demonstrations everywhere. The Austrian president biting his nails in the presidency right now, waiting on the result of the presidential election there, with the real possibility, maybe probability, that yet another European government is about to fall, directly related to the giant stone that we've struggled to lift and dropped only on our own feet in the economic war we declared against Russia. The provocations are coming thick and fast. The tossing of so-called collaborators into ditches, their hands tied behind their back, signs of torture evident even in the merest glance at the social media posting before one necessarily looks away. People with their throats cut and bullets riddled into their backs and the backs of their head are being boasted about on Twitter. It's funny, you get a false label applied to you if they don't like your political stripe. If you're me, you get kicked off of Twitter. If you're Scott Ritter and you're talking too much well-informed sense, but you can post videos of mutilated corpses being tossed into pits, just like the Eastern Holocaust and the Einsatzgruppen under the leadership of Bandera and his SS collaborators in the Second World War. You can see the death pits right now on Twitter. I just have looked at those death pits. Posted by the leader of the Azov battalion. I have just seen a picture of the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. Not some infandus street corner Azov agitator. No, the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. He wears a watch, exceedingly vulgar in every respect, except one panel of the bracelet, very clear. You just have to zoom in, is a Nazi swastika on the watch of the head of the Ukrainian armed forces. You couldn't make this up. Nothing to see here, say the liberals and the progressives. Nothing to see here, says The Guardian and the New York Times and the BBC and CNN. Move quickly on. Nothing to see here. They've chosen their side, and they are mounting provocation after provocation. They are endorsing or ignoring every atrocity carried out by their Nazi and fascist and extreme Ukrainian nationalist collaborators, all to force a war with Russia. The question for you is this: do you want a war with Russia? As Donald Trump said, it might end all human life on the planet. Do you want your children and your grandchildren wiped out in a war to decide whether Islam, which has crossed borders 10 times in 500 years, been in Russia, been in Ukraine, been in Poland, which country it's to be in? Kupiansk. You ready to die for Kupiansk? Because you will if the nuclear rockets start firing. Are you ready to die for Balaklia? Try saying that in a hurry. That's what this war is about. Whether these places are in Russia and the people are Russian, they speak Russian, they identify as Russian, they want to be Russian. Aren't all you liberals all in favor of self-identification? Regard these people as Russians trapped in a Ukrainian body. Regard them as people in transition. Have some compassion. Let them identify. Isn't that what you normally say? Isn't that what you blackguard everybody else for not wanting to say? These people are Russians. They're trapped in a Ukrainian body. And they are determined to be what they want to be, to dress as they want to dress, talk as they want to talk, be themselves. Why don't you understand that? Why instead are you ready to kill all of us to stop Kupiansk being in Russia? I keep saying it because I know you've never heard of Kupiansk. I know you couldn't place it on the map. You can't spell it. You can't even say it. Even I have to write it down. You're going to die for Kupiansk if something is not done to stop this headlong dash to catastrophe, because it's happening tomorrow morning. Because Russia will reply to Ukraine's birthday present on the Kerch Bridge. And they will reply swiftly and devastatingly. If you're in a British or American linked installation in Kiev right now, I'd get out of there as fast as you can. If you are in any proximity at all to anything connected with NATO and with the foreign governments whose soldiers, yes, soldiers, trainers, special forces, diplomats, propagandists, financiers and armorers are teeming in Kiev, I'd get out of the way very quickly if I was you, because I feel sure that tomorrow will not be a good day for Ukraine. It will not be a good day for anyone living anywhere near the installations and the infrastructure of the NATO invaders of the Ukraine. Professor John Mearsheimer, no Bolshevik, him, no Russian, him, no communist, no leftist. Professor John Mearsheimer advised you in a speech you can watch right after this show on YouTube that Ukraine is going to be led into a minefield by NATO policy. It's going to be in a desperate pickle, he said with masterful understatement. He said, Professor Mearsheimer, not me, that Ukraine is going to be destroyed by these NATO provocations, which began at least in 2014 with the overthrow of the elected government in Kiev and its replacement by a motley collection of Nazis, fascists, and extreme Ukrainian nationalists whose first act was to delegitimize and illegalize the Russian language in the eastern part of their country, where 40% of their population lives, were to be made foreigners in their own land. And they have never accepted it, will never accept it. And so all of you seeking to recover, as you put it, the Crimean Peninsula, which has been Russian for longer than the United States has even existed. For 500 years, the Russian Navy has been docked there. Those of you seeking to recover Donetsk or Mariupol, this is moonshine. Do you think a nuclear-armed superpower like Russia is going to allow that to happen? And if there was even the remotest danger of it happening, the nuclear weapons would fly and Trump would be right and we would be dead. For Kupiansk, for Balaklia, and for Izium. Is it worth it? I know it's not your son that's going to be sent to fight there. It's somebody else's son. But it's your son that's going to die when the rockets start firing. Start firing, they will tomorrow. So when Russia wreaks its terrible revenge for the attack that they warned over and over again was a red line for them, in the morning, tomorrow, the question is what your leaders are going to do next. So far, despite one after another losing their majority, losing their seat, losing their office, they keep on keeping on. The question is, how long are you going to put up with it? Especially when, on every other front, your governments are such miserable failures. We've got an imposter in 10 Downing Street in Britain. If she wandered into a local town hall in Cleethorpes and claimed to be a local councillor, nobody would believe her. They'd think she was a madwoman that walked in off the street with delusions of grandeur, that she's the lady mayor of Cleethorpes. That's the level of delusion I'm talking about. Of course, she's in office, but not in power. It was the Chancellor, him, that big bad boy that done it and ran away, who decided on a budget so berserk that even the Conservative Party could not stomach it for more than 48 hours and forced them to scrap it in the middle of their own party conference in Birmingham. Oh no, she's saying today, I'm not going to cut people's benefits, as I said for the last 6 weeks I was going to do. That was him over there's idea not mine. But she is in office. And a good war, a wag the dog, is always attractive for a leader in trouble, is it not? Liz Truss is particularly dangerous right now because she may be gone by Christmas. Joe Biden, bonkers Joe Biden, is particularly dangerous right now because he's facing the mother of all thrashings in the midterm elections in just a few weeks' time in November. A wagging of the dog would do Joe some good, perhaps. Worth a try, is it not? Little soldier Schultz, the head of a minority government in Berlin, might not survive the new year either, so why not turn up the amp, turn up the volume, turn up the weapons, flying like some monstrous dark cloud that will rain down acid and nuclear winter on all of us. Fasten your seatbelts. I promise you tonight is going to be an even more bumpy ride. This is the mother of all talk shows.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, no member of the British Parliament, virtually no member of the American Congress, virtually no member of any elected parliament anywhere will say anything remotely like what I just said to you now. But there is one woman in the European Parliament, a Joan of Arc, who's come back to walk among us, who speaks so powerfully. The walls of the European Parliament shake. But that's all, because nobody ever reports the things that she says. But here on the mother of all talk shows, we're going to regularly feature Clare Daly, member of the European Parliament. Here she was speaking in the European Parliament this very week.
The war in Ukraine is quickly escalating into a wider horror, and from what I can see, practically nobody in this chamber is doing anything to prevent it. In fact, most people seem to get off on the fact that it's escalating. And at this precise moment, of course, as usual, the voices challenging the rush to war are attacked and silenced, smeared as traitors, cronies, Putin puppets, Kremlin stooges, Russian agents. Frankly, it's pathetic. And I don't make the comparison lightly, But the crudeness and cynicism of these slurs coming from mainstream EU parties might as well have been written by Hermann Göring, who infamously said that even though people never want war, they can be brought to war with threats and smears. He said, all you have to do, tell them they're being attacked, denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing their country to danger. It works the same every way. Where he led, you are following. This House should be ashamed of this debate. Words are being twisted, meaning subverted, and the truth turned on its head. Opposing the horrible madness of war is not anti-European. It's not anti-Ukrainian. It's not pro-Russian. It's common sense. The working class of Europe have nothing to gain from this war and everything to lose. And I find it laughable that those calling for arms to Ukraine never call for arms for the people of Palestine or for the people of Yemen. Unlike you, I oppose all war. I want it stopped. I make no apology for that, and I'm not going to be scapegoated and labelled.
Clare Daly coming regularly and soon on the mother of all talk shows. Here are the telephone numbers. If you're in the United States or Canada, it's +1 844 944 3344. That's +1 844 944 3344. It's toll free. It will cost you nothing at all. If you're in the United Kingdom or Ireland, it's 08 081 965522. That's 08 081 965522. Now, amongst the very few citadels of journalism, investigative journalism of the very highest caliber, is the Grey Zone Project in the United States, which has many fine journalists and commentators writing on it. None finer than Alex Rubinstein, who is an investigative reporter and contributor to the Grey Zone and the host of Pro-Democracy Pod. And Alex joins us now. Welcome back on the mother of all talk shows, Alex. Good to see you again. Let's start, can we, with these Nazis who no one else can see in Ukraine. What is it about the swastikas, the death's heads, the SS regalia, the tattoos, the watch bracelets on police chiefs, on the head of the armed forces, on street corners, on Bandera Avenue, where IKEA, of all places, actually proudly sits with Bandera Street Avenue as its address? What is it about all this Nazi memorabilia and regalia that liberals and progressives in the West can't see?
Well, first, George, I want to thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to talk to you and your audience. The propaganda in the United States and other NATO countries is the most sophisticated in the world. And so you have this, despite the ubiquity of these Nazi symbols in the Ukrainian armed forces, it's completely glossed over by the media. It's actually the idea of Nazism existing in Ukraine is delegitimized by the media very intentionally. They say, oh, the president is Jewish. This is something that I've talked about quite a lot in my reporting. But it's because of this propaganda that you have otherwise decently meaning people, people who believe in human rights and LGBTQ rights and are anti-racist, openly supporting this indisputably Nazi project in Ukraine, which is the war against Russia. You have in the West yesterday widespread celebration by the intelligentsia, verified Twitter accounts unanimously celebrating the terrorist attack, a potential suicide bombing on the Kerch Bridge. This is not the first time that Ukraine has bombed civilian bridges. And yes, it's true that that the Kerch Bridge was also used for military purposes, but it also served civilian purposes, and it was a civilian truck that was blown up. So this is, after 20 years of the war on terror, how is it that we are now celebrating terrorism? It's mind-boggling, and it's precisely because of how sophisticated the propaganda is. and anywhere. And there's this tendency where if you go on social media and you put out a counter a line that is counter to the mainstream narrative, you are pilloried. And so the goal of that is to make the conversation in the digital sphere one-sided, where you only get one perspective, and that is the NATO perspective. So it's very troubling, and I worry for the future of our countries, not only in the realm of foreign policy, but in our domestic policies to fight back in any meaningful capacity, because we are so brainwashed.
As it happens, I know rather a lot about the Holocaust, and I'm sure you do also. I'm something of an amateur student of the Holocaust in the East. The Holocaust in the West, the extermination camps, the gas chambers, and so on, are relatively better known than the Holocaust in the East, which was up close and personal. The Jews and non-Jews, Polish and Ukrainian, who were massacred in hundreds and thousands, industrial quantities, in the Eastern Holocaust, were not, as it were, relatively anonymously pushed into ovens or into gas chambers. They were piled dead into pits. Fascists and Nazis walked on top of the bodies in the pits, eliminating anybody who moved. The slaughter lasted for more than a year and a half, and millions of people, most of them Jews, were massacred by the SS, of course, the Einsatzgruppen, of course, but with hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian collaborators who were all followers of this Bandera, who is an icon of the Ukrainian state. How is it that the readers of the New York Times or the Guardian, or people who regard themselves as liberals and progressives, just turn their face away from that?
Well, I would imagine it's very easy as a New York Times reporter to turn your face away from that. I mean, if you were to talk about something like this, you would face canceling by every imaginable institution. Early on in this war, I pointed out that because there was the fake news that actually Zelensky himself promoted, that Russia had attacked the monument at Babin Yar, which is where over 100,000 people, Poles, Jews, and communists were massacred by Stepan Bandera's Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. And it's funny that you mentioned earlier Stepan Bandera Avenue in Kiev, because that leads to the site where his forces, Babin Yar, carried out this massacre. But I apologize. To be a New York Times reporter, you have to follow the line, and the line is that Ukraine is the good guy. Russia's lying about its denazification. The president is Jewish. Meanwhile, the president has promoted this Valery Zaluzny, who wears a swastika bracelet, to the head of the armed forces of Ukraine. This is the guy in charge of all the weapons that the United States and Great Britain and Canada and all the other NATO countries are sending. I'm glad that you talk about the Holocaust of the East. Just the other week, Zelensky's bodyguard, his personal bodyguard, was photographed with a patch that calls that references the SS Adolf Hitler Division, named after Adolf Hitler himself. And these are people who went from village to village burning houses. There's one unit in particular called the Blowtorch Battalion, and I found photographs for my article about this patch, this Nazi patch worn by Zelensky's bodyguard, of them lighting their cigarettes on the burning rooftops of houses. This is the kind of terror that the organization of Ukrainian nationalists and not only them, but the Nazis themselves carried out in the East. And this is the terror, the same terror that the people of Donetsk face today. My very good friend and fellow reporter, Wyatt Reed, yesterday was in Donetsk, and he was leaving a restaurant and going back to his hotel. And in between the restaurant and his hotel was an artillery strike. What military purpose does an artillery strike have in that location? Absolutely none. He's been there for less than 24 hours. And in the course of his time being there, his less than 1 day in Donetsk, he was nearly killed himself by an artillery strike. This is the exact terror that people of Donetsk have been facing for 8 years, and it's totally ignored by the West. Any kind of condemnation is accused of being apologia of anyone who says, brings up the history of the past 8 years is a Russian apologist, Putin's stooge. And it's this pressure from shady organization, from shady operations on social media, from the institutions themselves, that silences any kind of anti-war message here or any kind of balanced perspective. There can only be one side of this conversation, and I wanted to point out after I mentioned this fake news of Babin Yar being bombed by Russia. The Holocaust Museum blocked me. And I'm a Jewish person, so it's even the organizations that are dedicated towards remembering and making sure we all keep in mind the lessons of the Holocaust are attempting to contribute to this effort of stifling any kind of counter narrative against fascism.
Now, on the subject of hoaxes, there are none as large, but which were punctured so quickly as the canard that Russia had blown up its own Nord Stream pipelines. Now the US seem not even to be denying anymore that it was them that did it. A terrorist attack by anybody's standards, I argue, the biggest terrorist attack since 9/11. What's the current shape of public opinion on that attack in the United States, Alec? In Germany, 92% of the people believe the US carried out the attack on Nord Stream, which speaks to the good sense of most Germans. What say the American people on this?
Well, unfortunately, George, I can't tell you. I don't live in the United States, although I am from there. So my view of the United States and the people and their thinking, unfortunately, comes through Twitter, which I don't think is entirely accurate. I think that people in the United States, well, it's interesting because for most of my life, liberals questioned the CIA. They were very critical of the CIA. They remember the lies of Vietnam. Unfortunately, something has happened since then, and once again, I go back to the propaganda because it's so powerful and pervasive. Something happened, and I would place it around 2016. When the intelligence community concocted this lie with the Hillary Clinton campaign that Russia had hacked our elections, brains were like shut off en masse. It's like somebody was at a control board and flipped off all the switches. And I'm no longer confident that the well-intentioned liberals whose political community I was born into and raised into are able to place the blame on anything but Russia for really anything. I do think there is one thing that will always trump propaganda, and that is the price of oil. So as the price of oil goes up, there will be more pushback against this war. Unfortunately, I think it's going to happen a lot faster in Europe. For example, you see these massive protests in France against NATO. The Germans are starting to be very critical In the United States, not a single communist party, to my knowledge, has held a protest against the NATO war. Not a single anti-war group, for that matter, as well. So you see that in the United States, it's very far behind the rest, Europe, and many other countries in NATO.
Alex, how do people follow your work?
You can follow me on Twitter at RealAlexRuby, that's R-U-B-I, and you can read my articles on the Gray Zone.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows, Alex Rubinstein. Now, I said I had a poll running. Here it is. Which American can broker peace in the Russia-Ukraine war? Humor me. A, Donald Trump. B, Elon Musk. Well, counting the community poll and the poll since this show began, something like 10,000 people have voted. And this is how they've voted so far. Donald Trump, 76%. Elon Musk, 24%. That's on Twitter. On YouTube, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's very, very important. Just click subscribe. That's it. Done. On YouTube, 79% Donald Trump, 21% Elon Musk. And on Telegram, please follow me on Telegram. That's t.me/George Galloway. It's Donald Trump 74, Elon Musk 26. Sorry, Elon. People seem to think that the deal maker, Donald Trump, how berserk is it that we're actually hoping that Donald Trump gets involved in the Russia-Ukraine war as being the only way to save us from the end of life on this planet? Of course, everybody who speaks out against the prevailing orthodoxy places themselves in danger. And there's none have done so more bravely than the guest I'll have right after this break, Katie Halper. Stay tuned.
You know, and it's a very, thank you for, you know, I'm a big fan of your show, Gigi. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, you know. I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary McLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, you know, haggis. Look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
What's more Scottish than Donald Trump? Haggis and Donald Trump. The mind boggles. Now, Katie Halper is a writer. She's the host of The Katie Halper Show and co-host of Useful Idiots, which must be a cracking show because there's so much material to work with. But something happened to her on the way to the studio. Let's find out. Katie Halper, welcome back to the mother of all talk shows. Wonderful to see you again.
Thanks so much for having me.
The accident that befell you, the act of censorship that brought one of your streams of knowledge and wisdom to an end was what exactly?
So I have been a guest on the show Rising, which is on the Hill. I've been a weekly guest. I would come on every week for about 3 years. Then they also had me do some guest hosting, so doing actual hosting for the show. I had done that 4 times. I was supposed to do it 3 more times. It was maybe going to become more regular. I also had pitched them a pilot, which was an all women's panel show, kind of like The View, but an all leftist version. We'd shot a pilot for that, and we'd released 1 clip, and that did really well. And while I was hosting for them, hosts get to do something called radars. They're basically straight-to-camera monologues, and I decided that I want to do one about the controversy, which should not have been controversial, but the controversy that followed Rashida Tlaib's claim that you can't really, that progressives are realizing more and more that you can't be progressive and support Israel's apartheid government. And of course, the claim that Israel's government is an apartheid government. She had said that, she was attacked, so I decided to both defend her and also make the case that Israel is indeed an apartheid government. And I made the case by citing the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, several Palestinian human rights organizations, the Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem, South African leaders, including Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, and ironically enough, several Israeli politicians and officials, including Israeli prime ministers, all of whom, the ones I cited, all of them warned that apartheid was either happening now or would happen shortly. So I did that, and then they refused to run that monologue. And then when I pushed back and asked if they could let me at least talk about it as a guest, if not running my monologue, that's when I was told that my services were no longer needed. So my appearing, something that had happened over the course of 3 years regularly, that relationship was severed. And I was told basically to submit any and all unpaid invoices, and I was told best of luck.
Of course, the fools on the Hill had never heard of the Streisand effect. And of course, you have now been lifted by the Streisand effect. The book they ban always goes to the top of the bestseller list. What was the reaction amongst the public to this extraordinary, brute act of censorship?
So the great news was that despite the fact that I was censored by The Hill, I definitely wanted to get the message out there, and I had written the script. So what I did was I reached out to the great people at Breakthrough News, who are actually an independent media organization who don't engage in censorship and don't censor their hosts. So I collaborated with them, and we made the video that I had written the script for, which I had actually recorded it on The Hill. It's not that they didn't record it. They just recorded it and refused to release it. So I made that, and you can find that video both on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/TheKatieHalperShow. Again, that's youtube.com/TheKatieHalperShow, or on Breakthrough News's YouTube channel. And the response that I've gotten has been overwhelmingly positive. A lot of support. My Patreon has gone up, which is nice, which is patreon.com/TheKatieHalperShow. I'm just going to shamelessly plug that. But it's true. People have really, a lot of people have
now. You're no longer being paid by The Hill.
Right, yes. So, and I wrote a piece, an op-ed about it for the Daily Beast, because I wanted to make sure it was in a kind of mainstream corporate publication. I didn't think it would reach The Hill in the same way if I did it somewhere kind of more leftist or more independent. So I decided to do it the Daily Beast. It's been covered by the Sheer Post, Mondo Weiss, Palestine Legal, the Worldwide Socialist Web. I'm sure I'm forgetting some places now. Oh, Juan Cole. And yeah, a lot of people. Roger Waters saluted me, and Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib tweeted about it. Roger Waters mentioned it on the Joe Rogan show. So, and of course, I mean, this is what happened to me pales in comparison to what happens to Palestinian journalists. And of course, as we all know, Palestinian journalists risk not just their livelihoods, but their lives. And of course, Shireen Abu Akleh is just one of the several examples of that. So I want to, of course, make sure to elevate those stories. And also want to shout out Adala, the really good legal and human rights organization whose work was really helpful for the monologue that I wrote, and also Electronic Intifada, who do great work, and also whose work I looked to when I was writing that monologue.
Now, I presume you were attacked as being anti-Semitic.
Well,
but
either
Jewish.
Right.
No.
I am. So I like to correct people and say you're lobbing the wrong smear. I prefer self-loathing Jew. Thank you. They're erasing me when they call me an anti-Semite. Of course, I kid somewhat because the people who call you anti-Semitic or self-loathing Jew, their thesis is that I've internalized anti-Semitism. And of course, what I say to that is the irony is that the anti-Semitic trope is that all Jews are a monolith who have the same opinion on Israel. That's the anti-Semitic trope. That's the stereotype. Being Jewish does not mean you have a certain political ideology. It does not mean you unquestioningly and blindly support the government of Israel. In fact, there's been a long, rich history of anti-Zionist Jewish scholarship and activism. And so what places like AIPAC and the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and AIPAC like to do is pretend that any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, and they do that so that they can stifle or delegitimize the very legitimate and valid criticism of Israel. So since they know they can't really push back on the arguments, they can't push back on the facts on the ground, such as the fact that Israel is an apartheid government, they can't do that. So what they do is they try to shoot the messenger so that they can try to taint the message. And again, the irony is that there is real anti-Semitism in the world when places like the ADL and AIPAC weaponize anti-Semitism to stifle critique of Israel. They are trivializing anti-Semitism.
Yes, and I was going to make the point that here, I don't know if you saw the Al Jazeera expose of the Labour files, which all these wonderful, slightly elderly now, Jewish women fighters that featured in that program, who have been fighting anti-Semitism and racism and for justice for Palestine for all of their adult lives.
Right.
All of them have now been kicked out of the Labour Party. Keir Starmer, in the name of rooting out anti-Semitism, has expelled more Jews from the Labour Party than anyone would ever have dreamt of in the entire history of the Labour movement.
It's really disgusting. It is a ironically disgusting thing to do, especially, targeting Jews is kind of an ironic thing to do when you're claiming to stamp out anti-Semitism. But again, it just shows you how cynical these people are, people who weaponize anti-Semitism and just try to use it for political ends. And I would also say that something is that's important to look at is, because AIPAC and ADL do not represent most Jews. And for a lot of Jews, it's actually their Jewish values. I mean, this is a whole other discussion we could get into, but there's even something called Tikkun Olam, which is Hebrew for repair the world. And that is a social justice idea that motivates some Jews. And that's something that makes some Jews actually speak out against what Israel's doing and say, not in our name, not in my name. And of course, the atrocious, horrific tragedy, abomination that is the Holocaust is something that for many Jews, progressive Jews, that's something that it's because of things like that we don't want to stand in solidarity with what Israel's doing, because the way that you respond to the Holocaust should not be through ethnic cleansing and apartheid state.
Well, a late and great friend of mine, the Right Honourable Sir Gerald Kaufman, whose grandmother was murdered in the Holocaust, said, my grandmother wasn't murdered in her bed in Eastern Europe to provide cover for Israeli terror forces. Right. Murdering other people's grandmothers in their beds in the occupied Palestinian lands. It was one of the most electric parliamentary moments. Look it up. Wow. But Katie, here's the other irony. The theme tonight on the show is world turned upside down, and one of the extents to which the world is turned upside down is that it is people who identify themselves as being left, liberal, progressive, who are hottest on censorship in this strange year of 2022. We've got the grotesque spectacle of people on the right championing free speech and people on the left seeking to cancel people like you and me. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, that's pretty disturbing to see. And of course, it's not all leftists, but there are some people who identify as left and actually try to get people like you and me kind of canceled as members of the left. I would just say that anyone on the left who supports censorship is either being short-sighted or disingenuous, because the people who suffer most from censorship are the people on the left. And of course, this is a great example of, people who are really canceled and censored are people who probably one of the most censored groups of people are people who criticize Israel and defend Palestine. And if you're a Palestinian, forget about it. So anyone who cares about, allegedly cares about the most marginalized people in the world and elevating those voices should know that censorship is not going to get them anywhere.
Katie, I wish you all the best. I know that this big audience tonight will be saying the same thing. I hope we see you again before too long, and the best of luck with the work that you've still managed to hold on to. I hope the Streisand effect sweeps you to ever greater audiences. Thank you for again joining us. Now, the good news is that at halftime, Manchester United are beating Everton 2-1. I'd like to thank the Premiership for scheduling Manchester United's home game against Everton for 7 o'clock, exactly when my show began. Now, listen, on Wednesday, we relaunch the midweek Mother of All Talk Shows at 9 p.m. UK time. 9 p.m. UK time. We're gathering money to make sure it doesn't go up like a rocket and come down like a burnt stick. We want it to go into orbit and stay there. And everyone who has contributed, it's something like £40,000 has been contributed over this 6 months. Everyone who was a part of that will be memorialized forever in a roll of honor, just as soon as we can get round to it. If you want to be on that roll of honor, of those who kept the Mother of All Talk Shows going when all other means of support were deprived, were kicked from underneath us, then you still have a few days left to do it. If you are on YouTube, go to the super chat mechanism. It's the easiest. You can get a comment. It will be highlighted. I will read it. I might even be able to read it out on the show, either today or on Wednesday. And it can be in any denomination, any amount. $1, €1, £1, one Norwegian crown, one Australian dollar. You can give any amount in any denomination. So if you're on YouTube, please do that now. If you're not, go to MOATS.tv and look for the donate button and make a donation there. And then you'll be memorialized forever as one of those heroes who kept this show going. We've got a sponsor for the first hour of the midweek show, and all will be unveiled on Wednesday, but we still need a sponsor for the second hour. If you are a business person out there with the means and the motive of putting your company and its message in front of hundreds of thousands of people every week, after Wednesday it will be millions of people watching the Mother of All Talk Shows every week. If you want your name, your message out there, it is dirt cheap in advertising terms to get that message on. So contact us if you will. Wow, GM gave a whopping £100. GM, whether it's GM Motors or genetically modified foods, I have no idea. But Mr. or Ms. GM, for that £100, I thank you. The first to donate tonight was the one and only Albert Sontag. Thanks for hosting the great Garland Nixon from the USA, George. Thanks for all your effort and courage. Thank you, Albert, for all the help every single week that you gave us during this most difficult 6 months. Jason Kane gives £1. Annie, 2099, gives £2. Esther Apple gives $10. Kyle Wool gives $5. TC gives $5. Edmund Dante gives £17.99. Flat Racing Guru UK, the best name of the night. George, even billionaires have low IQ, begs the question, how do folks who are easily brainwashed become billionaires? Or, I'll tell you what, Guru, thinking that Putin will be hit where it hurts if you turn off all the heating in your 60-room castle and you and your 10th wife shiver to death. That's hitting Putin where it really, really hurts, don't you think, Guru? Adil Farid gives AED 25. Torlo Burke gives US 19.99. Karim Al-Nashi £17.99. And Mike Pepper £10. George, you are making me cry. Harry McLegs gives US 20. 1 minute to midnight. May the gods have mercy on us. And might they, we all know who they are, may their infernal master call them home sooner rather than later. We can only hope. Bang on time. I'm going for a quick break, and then it's your calls after that.
From the makers of Where's the WMDs? Who killed Epstein and pinned the blame on the Democratic donkey? Comes the brand new game, Where's Biden Hiding? Play the tapes. Figure out what the hell he's trying to say.
It is me, Joe Biden.
Try and find Where's Biden Hiding? Where's Biden hiding? We can't find him. This product is fictional and is not available in your local burn-down store. But seriously, if anyone finds him, please let us know.
Big thanks, obviously, to all our subscribers and listeners to the MOATS podcast. For the older amongst you, a podcast is the distilled version, about half as long, which has become a phenomenon on the internet. So it's a media phenomenon, and it's tearing up the mainstream media monopoly. Please download it on Apple or Spotify and leave us a 5-star review, like Sanam in London, who said, George, I've been watching your show for a long time, and I must admit that you are a true leader and very courageous man to carry on your work of exposing the truth and showing us the other side of the picture, which always gets blocked by the US and the West through their media. God bless you always. Sanam in London. Very touching, Sanam. Thank you very much for that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
I want to dedicate the rest of this show to the great Cristiano Ronaldo, the greatest of all time, the GOAT, who's just scored his 700th club goal. How about that then? Cristiano CR7, go CR7. Let's take a call from Colombia, from Sean. Wow, Sean in Colombia. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, George. Thanks for talking with me. Yeah, I recently lost my Twitter account, permanently banned, for apparently for liking a link to an archive of Gonzalo Lira's tweets shortly after he got banned. And just liking,
I mean, you couldn't make it up.
The only other possible thing I could think of is that probably within the previous 24 hours, I had asked Elon Musk to ensure that Starlink was only used for peaceful purposes and would be equally available no matter which banking system you were on, no matter which side of the border you were on. Now, maybe that was their real reason, and they used the other one as a pretext because they called that Twitter ban evasion.
Well, look, Gonzalo Lira is our most popular guest by distance on the mother of all talk shows. I was doing the numbers just the other day. Gonzalo Lira gets more views than any other guest. Scott Ritter gets the second highest number, and both of them are banned off Twitter, which is partly the Streisand effect that I was talking to the great Katie Halper about. You ban them so people want to hear them, just to spite the tyrants that banned them, or to try and work out what it is that they're saying that is so dangerous to the tyrants. So their numbers grow. Third, by the way, is Chris Hedges, who in a sane America would be the Secretary of State, if not the President himself. But the cavalry is coming over the hill, Sean, in the form of Elon Musk. Now, I don't know Elon Musk, though I know him a bit better now than I did 6 months ago. But the reality is that the platform is currently owned by people who have turned it into a rigged scam for the establishment, for the power. Not just for American power, but for Democrat American power. They kicked off the sitting president of the United States. They suppressed ruthlessly, along with others, the Hunter Biden laptop story, in case it affected the outcome of Biden versus Trump 1. 2 is still to come, I hope. What fun that will be, Sean. They are ruthlessly using this platform. And by the way, the biggest single owner of Twitter is the Saudi royal family. You're sitting down. The Saudi royal family, those paragons of free speech and liberty and democracy, are the biggest owners of Twitter. Now, Musk can only be better than that. At least he has pledged himself to exposing the level of robots, to exposing the level of algorithmic suppression, of opening the doors to many, including you, that have been wrongfully excluded from the public square. I like to think he'll settle my case of the false labeling of me as a Russian state media affiliate, when I am not, and when it would be a criminal offence for me to be so here in Britain. So I think that things can only get better, to quote a song that Tony Blair used to sing. Thanks for the call, Sean. Jonathan is in Kansas. This sure doesn't look like Kansas. Jonathan, go ahead.
Hello. I wanted to talk about something that I've been seeing in the media, and it's with the Kerch Bridge. It seems as though it's reported more as a blow to Vladimir Putin and a blow to the front, but in contrast, compared to how Izium and Bucha and all of the other different strikes that transpired on the railroad ways are talked about as, massacres, things of this nature. It's so sad that when it comes to the Kerch Bridge, preliminary results are coming out now that, maybe 3 people died, maybe more, but it's not reported as a massacre or anything of this nature. And I find that to be just sad.
Well, it is sad and it is infuriating, but it's also a death rattle. A society, a power that requires these levels of Orwellian doublespeak and doublethink, that requires this level of suppression, of dissent, and even just of simple questioning. John Stuart Mill, writing on liberty, said that we were harming ourselves by suppressing the alternative point of view, not harming the person that we're suppressing, because the person we're suppressing, and I quote Mill, what they're saying might be true, or might in part be true. And by denying ourselves access to that which might be true or in part be true, we're harming ourselves. So a society that is so insecure that it has to go to these lengths of banning Sean in Colombia off Twitter for liking a Gonzalo Lira link to a video is a society not much longer in its present form. So don't be despondent. I'm not suggesting that the prevailing orthodoxy is going to collapse next week or even next year, although one never knows when the last straw will be laden onto the camel's back. If one knew, one wouldn't laid it on the camel's back. But I'm not suggesting it's tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, but it's coming yet for all that. So don't despair, Jonathan, on that. They call it something praiseworthy because it happened on a Russian bridge. Tomorrow, when Russia destroys, I would have thought, every bridge still standing in the Ukraine, it will be described as a terror attack. When people who are... The Daily Mail did an article this week about how collaborators are hunted down and shot like pigs in Ukraine. Without a trial, of course. Without any way of knowing whether they really were collaborators or not, or whether they were the settling of scores with people of a different political stripe or even a personal gripe from you. You just call them a collaborator and you shoot them down like pigs. That was the headline in the Daily Mail. This level of doublespeak, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, has already led us right up the Khyber Pass and has already led us into such contortions. Our head is right up our own fundament, Jonathan. Thanks very much for the call. Richard is in Bristol. Go ahead, Richard.
Hello, George. Very pleased to speak to you. Thank you for making time.
And you, my friend.
I'd like to recamp on the Ukraine issue. Is that I know you know John Pilger, but several years ago when the Nord Stream 2 was being constructed, right, you could tell there was a lot of hostility from the US over this. And when Trump announced they were pulling out of Afghanistan, I think most people knew that they had another conflict lined up, ready to take its place, and that was why it was a rushed withdrawal, without any dignity whatsoever, wasn't it? It was horrendous, the withdrawal from Afghan.
Exactly.
And I was surprised
exactly.
how long it took them to blow up the pipeline. I thought they would have done it a little bit more covertly than what they did it. I mean, it was so obvious how what transpired.
It's difficult. It's difficult, Jonathan, Richard, to do it covertly because it's at the bottom of the Baltic Sea and you can only do it. I mean, you and I couldn't do it. It needs to be done with someone with submarine assets, someone with air-to-sea missile capability, someone with frogmen that can go down in a mini submarine, swim out, put the TNT, 100 kilograms of it, on the pipeline and get out of the way before it blows up in this gigantic act of terrorism. As I said, because they're the gang that can't shoot straight, they actually missed one of the pipelines. One of them is still extant, Richard.
Yeah, I know this. I'm following it quite closely. But the other point I'd like to make is that all these politicians that are putting, say, Ukraine first. I don't know whether you've seen that German politician minister. I think.
Yeah, the Green.
Where she said. She said.
The Greens are big on war in Germany and elsewhere.
I don't care about my voters. I'm interested in the people of Ukraine. I think that is treason That is treason. If people in her own country die this winter because of her corrupt person, because it's obviously, I mean, there's trillions of pounds to be made. How could you sell American gas to a country when it's 7 times the price that Russia was charging? How can you sell? So they come about
7 times, Richard, plus the investment in new port architecture and engineering to allow you to receive this American LNG. 7 times dearer, thousands of miles further away across the ocean, and a massive investment which I'm sure the country, the state, will have to pay in order that this gas can be landed in the first place. Last word to you, Rich.
So all our politicians, everybody that supports it, they've got to be. They can't be that stupid. Surely, it's got to be corruption at a terrible level. I cannot believe these people are unaware.
Richard, treason never prospers. For if it prospers, none dare call it treason. Let's go to Hong Kong, where Chris wants to talk about China and NATO. Chris, welcome to the show.
Oh,
I'm shouting because you're in Hong Kong.
I've been on for a long time, mate. Oh, China and NATO. Well, I got a good one for you, but it is a good one. Let's talk sanctions, and we're benefiting a bit down in Asia from sanctions against Russia. We have a very large super yacht in Victoria Harbour at the moment, and NATO stan officials, that's EU and US of course, are jumping up and down because allegedly in the sovereign waters of the People's Republic of China, which is not sanctioning Russia over Ukraine, allegedly this yacht, which is owned by a billionaire, a Russian oligarch, believe it or not, who's rather friendly with President Putin, it shouldn't be here, and there will be consequences. Well, of course, President Xi is shaking in his pants at the moment about these consequences, no doubt. Unless, of course, it's Alzheimer's bidden threatening nuclear war with us. And, well, of course, none of us will be around to discuss that one if that kicks off.
Well, I'm no friend of oligarchs. If I've ever met a Russian oligarch, I'm not aware of it. But they're as entitled to have yachts as any other oligarch, aren't they? They're all, from my point of view, thieves of the people's wealth. I make no distinction between a Russian oligarch, a British one, and an American one. Yeah, and I don't believe in super yachts. I mean, there's the have-nots and the have-yachts and the have-super yachts. Why do you need a super yacht? And these super yachts are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. A super yacht is really a ship. Why do you need a ship? I mean, once upon a time, I'd have been happy with a rowing boat.
What about a canoe? That's all we had when we were youngsters, and we were all very happy. But the point of the matter is...
I was so poor, I never even had a canoe, Rich.
Well, we lived on the canal and we borrowed. So there we go. But the reality is...
I was poorer than you. Thanks. Look, go on. Last word to you, Chris.
The reality is China is a massive sovereign power. We have no sanctions on Russia. We're on friendly terms. And what is it to do with either the EU or Washington? What ships are moored in Victoria?
Well, I'll tell you what.
Nothing.
Exactly. Exactly. I want to clarify that he said ship and not something else. But I think that NATO Stan will live, Chris. A phrase is born. We are living in NATO Stan. I think that is genius. Tony is in Liverpool. Go ahead, Tone.
Evening, George. Hope you're well, mate.
All good, thanks. Sorry about Liverpool today.
Yeah, it could have been better, that result today, mate. It really could have been. I'm astonished, George, to see the state that Europe is leading itself into now. It's clear Germany is in the process of hibernating much of its industrial industry, and they are the powerhouse in terms of heavy industry in Europe, the one and only, really. On top of that, we've seen also over this weekend, the German media have actually confirmed Germany has only 2 days' worth of munitions left on their shelves. If they were to go to war now, they have 2 days' supplies of munitions. That's it. Because
it's a good time to invade Germany. Actually, maybe the French could get their revenge because the Jerrys have only got 2 days of bullets left. I'm not joking.
Absolutely, George. Absolutely. But I think the economic repercussions are going to be absolutely catastrophic because winter has barely kicked in yet. It's still quite mild even here in the UK, as you will know. But when the winter really hits, Europe's going to be in so much trouble because they're in so much debt. They can't really borrow any more money because it's just going to spike inflation even further. The same applies in this country as well. And as you've already touched on earlier, we're seeing political changes right across Europe. Majorities have certainly been lost. Governments have already fallen in Sweden and in Italy. And there's more of that to come. There's more of that to come. And I think they probably realise now, the Europeans, they've got to get... Well, essentially, they think they've got to try to somehow manufacture the removal of Vladimir Putin in Moscow, which is absolutely laughable. But they are so desperate now that they've got no munitions left. It's all been burnt up in Ukraine by the Ukrainians. They've got no more money. You know, they're printing money hand over fist. They're going out of business, George. The whole of Europe, and the Americans are laughing at Europe because they're more than happy to see Europe go down along with Ukraine. They couldn't give a toss about either of them. And the big winner is President Xi in China because he sat back in his chair thinking, you know, I'm a winner here. I win.
I think we'll need to all move to China, Tony. That was a masterful exposition of the state we're in. Right after this short break is the one and only Garland Nixon. Stay tuned.
Hello, America. It is me, Joe Biden. I think I'm not reading a teleprompter. I'm perfectly capable of speaking for myself. Myself.
The giant Labour Party sailing clearance is now on. Hurry now, as we've got zero interest in our party. It's literally the lowest it's ever been. Give up on the common man and save today. That's right, we're getting rid of all of the Corbynites. Literally every single one. Being a Blairite has never been more in style. Only available at what should be the UK's biggest political party. The new Labour Party. We're doing this again.
Time, weather, and...
Let's play a game and I'll ask you yes or no questions. Ready? Okay then. Sick and tired of hearing the same old voices on the wireless? Are you looking for an alternative opinion to the mainstream media? Do you have a thing for a Scottish accent? If your answer is no to one or more of these questions, then you need the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway. Listen, watch, and share the fastest growing political program in the world.
Don't forget to vote on the poll which American can broker peace in the Russia-Ukraine war. There then follows Hobson's choice, Donald Trump or Elon Musk. So far, over 3/4 of the well over 10,000 votes that have been cast throughout the day favour Donald Trump. As I said, it's a world gone mad when Donald Trump is the only one speaking sense about the war in Ukraine. Who'd have thunk it? Well, let's hear what the sage from the USA, the one and only Garland Nixon, thinks about that. Welcome, Garland. Always a delight, not a pleasure, a delight to have you on the show. Let's start with that point. Neither of us are supporters of Donald Trump. I don't think that's a secret to anyone on either side of the pond. How did it come to pass that Donald Trump, with Henry Kissinger providing the intellectual heavyweight ballast, are the only people in America, or here for that matter, talking sense about the need to stop this war before it goes nuclear?
I think one of the things that has happened recently is Joe Biden was speaking at a fundraiser in New York, and he invoked the specter of nuclear war, and in particular he used the word nuclear Armageddon. I think that the neocons had planned on arguing that we were in danger of a nuclear war so that they could get people more frightened and more easy to control. But I think it had the opposite effect, particularly amongst the wealthy and powerful who they want to stick around a while and enjoy their wealth and power. Consequentially, we've seen a number of very powerful people come out and say, whoa, let's put the brakes on, and perhaps we need to talk this thing down. And Donald Trump, specifically now, is calling for immediate diplomacy to end the Ukraine conflict. I think that's going to have a dramatic effect, particularly because he has so much power and such a strong following in the Republican Party. It's going to make it more difficult for the neocon Republicans to move forward, allied with the Biden neocons.
Yes, one would have thought so, but it has come to something where it's labelled far right to be trying to stop a nuclear war. Once upon a time, that was the loony left's job.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But I think what has happened is this has gone, and particularly, as I said, it's very important that Joe Biden did this and that the neocons lately have been pushing this nuclear war trope. Clearly, you can see that it was a plan because it's everywhere in the news and it's being discussed everywhere. And I think it was really part of their plan. They saw the support dissolving, and they felt this was going to help. And instead, they scared the bejesus out of Americans, and now people are going in the opposite direction. And I also think it's going to have a really bad effect on them, because as people call, particularly people of note, Donald Trump, Jeffrey Sachs, Elon Musk, start calling for a negotiated end, it will reveal the truth about the neocons, that they aren't honest players here, that they don't want an end, and that this is not about what they're saying about they really want to weaken Russia, that they're really playing a game here, and they're not being honest with the American people. So they don't want a negotiated end, and that's going to make it more difficult for the neocons to hide their malicious intentions, shall we say.
That's a very shrewd observation, as always, from you. Trump, therefore, you're saying, is not actually leading this. He's responding to what is a rising tide. I mentioned Mearsheimer earlier, but Sachs is a much more contemporary and centrist figure in American academia, and his calls this week were so powerful and so damaging to the Biden administration. And then Elon Musk, who's been flying the Starlink satellites that the Ukrainian gunners were using for targeting, he turns in a dramatic 180 So in a way, this is not isolated. This is not Donald Trump just out there. This is something that is happening across the board, center-right maybe, but across that center-right board.
Well, let's never underestimate Donald Trump's political inclinations, his political abilities. I think Donald Trump was probably somewhat, opposed to this from the beginning. He's continually saying, if I was in charge, this wouldn't have happened. And I think Donald Trump might have waited a while. He had, kind of made some references that he wasn't happy that this wouldn't have happened under him. But I think he was waiting for the political cover. And I think someone like a Sachs, who's considered on the left, someone like an Elon Musk, who's considered somewhat of an independent, maybe a bit of a libertarian, they gave Donald Trump the cover that he needed. They're significant characters of note to come out strong. And I think that's going to be, it's going to make it difficult for the Republican Party, because how do the neocon Republicans respond? Do the neocon Republicans push back against their base and side with Joe Biden? So this is a huge move by Donald Trump in the pressure that it's going to create within the Republican Party.
Now, Garland, I have very good eyesight. Don't let the glasses fool you. There's a hat behind you which says Nixon 2024. Are you running for office, Congressman?
If nominated, I will not accept. And if the old General Sherman story. But no, I got that for fun. I put it back there just to kind of create a little bit buzz. There are circumstances that I would consider it, yes, but at this point, certainly not. You never know.
Well, I think you should consider it. You'd be truly outstanding. Let's talk about elections, though. How's it shaping up for the midterm elections? What's your educated guess a month out?
Well, I think the black swan event, as it were, is going to be gas prices. I think that there are two things I would keep an eye on. Number one, gas prices. If they continue to jack up, it's not going to work out well for the Democrats. I also want to keep an eye on this Donald Trump Ukraine stuff, because the fact of the matter is this: the polls show that more and more Americans are concerned with this war, and the numbers are dramatically moving in the direction of those who want to negotiate it in. So I think if Donald Trump really starts to grab this thing and run with it, that could have a dramatic effect on the Democrats. So gas prices, certainly, the issue of the Ukraine war, I think, are very big. As I see it right now, I think the Democrats take a pretty nasty beating, and then we're going to be looking. Then afterwards, I think this is important. After the election, in all likelihood, it appears like the Russians are going to have their feet set, as it were, with their new reserves. Joe Biden's going to be sitting there reeling from the beating that he took in the midterms, with a lame duck Democratic majority, and dealing with, in all likelihood, the Russians making some kind of offense. So, I'm interested in it. I don't think the Democrats do well. The question is, do they lose a little, or do they get annihilated? Right now, with what's happening with gas prices, I'm going to lead towards a destruction of biblical proportions for the Democratic Party.
So sad, too bad, never mind, as we say in Glasgow. But the biblical annihilation, which would be a cause of great celebration in my household, I must confess, will then leave the Republican Party in control of the Congress and its agenda. Joe Biden, to call him a lame duck is an insult to lame ducks. I mean, this is a dead duck presidency. Certainly dead from the shoulders up. The likelihood of criminal charges, of impeachment and so on, reverse ferreting by the Republicans must be very high. And the plump target of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden's role, nefarious role, I'll go so far to say, in Ukraine when he was the vice president to Barack Obama, this will all hove into view for political pay-per-view television, don't you think?
Absolutely. But I also think that Joe Biden better be looking over both shoulders. There are now some signs that the Democratic Party and his own support may be turning on him. Interestingly enough, there is a show called Saturday Night Live that comes on every Saturday night, and it's known, it's the heart of liberalism in New York, and they, attack Trump every week, and Joe Biden's wonderful. Well, they did a show this week where they made jest of Joe Biden's, mental lapses, shall we say. They joked about how bad things are in America. That certainly is a bad sign for Joe Biden. Those people are at the vanguard of liberal philosophy and politics in America. I think that if the midterm is as bad as we suspected that it will be, that the Democratic Party will be looking for a way to jettison Joe Biden. I also think that Hunter Biden may be a path to that, in that they, argue, look, you've got to leave. They're about to charge Hunter. They're going to investigate you and Hunter. You're going to bring the party down. Why don't you walk out the door? The problem they have is, though, they have Kamala Harris, and let's face it, she's about as bright as a wet match in a dark cave. So they don't have a lot of ways out, but I think they're going to be looking to ditch Joe Biden after the midterms.
Kamala Harris is one problem, but there is another one. Joe Biden cannot walk out the door. First of all, he can't walk, and secondly, he can't find the door.
Yeah, well, yes, it's you're watching that. It's getting embarrassing. Anytime Saturday Night Live, these are people that literally did Christmas carols to Mueller. They sung "We Wish You a Mueller Christmas," and they're the worst liberals, and they're making jest of Joe Biden's mental lapses. The guy just wanders around the stage aimlessly for no apparent reason, night after night. They can't figure out how to get him going in the right direction. It's getting embarrassing for the party, and I think once they really get wiped, and once they get wiped out in November, they don't have to admit that it's their policies. They don't have to admit that it's neoliberalism and that it's Ukraine. They can say, we just had a bad guy here, and now that we've cleaned him up, the party will turn right around and Kamala Harris will take us in the right direction. If she can figure out if she can figure out which is North Korea and which is South Korea, things of that nature.
I'd forgotten about that one. Garland Nixon, as always, thanks very much for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. What a superstar that man is. Which American can broker peace in the Russia-Ukraine war? Sort of tongue-in-cheek, but thousands of you have responded, and overwhelmingly, I'll not bother with the numbers, they're all over 3/4 have said that Donald Trump is the man. Jerry Jacobs has given £8.99. Jerry, thanks for that to the Fighting Fund. Thanks for saying it loud and clear. George, thank you, Jerry. Michael Hughes gives £5. Super introduction of sound ideas, Mr. Galloway. Thank you, Michael. Matlas X gives $9.99. The year 69 AD was known as the year of 4 emperors in Rome. I didn't know that. Every day is a school day. How many prime ministers will the UK have 12 months after Boris Johnson? AD 69. Let's all look that year up. That is fantastic. Well, there's every chance that it's a revolving door and that Liz Truss will be gone and Boris Johnson will be back. You'll have to move all that furniture, that very poorly chosen furniture and decor back in. Don't let her wallpaper the place again at fast public expense. She might not be there long enough to hang up her Christmas stocking. Revelyn Gale gives £2 from Puppet Zelensky to Terror Doll Chucky Zelensky. Dave Shaw gives £5. I will always be thankful of what Russia sacrificed in World War II to beat the Nazis. Thank you, Russia, says Dave. Ian Robert Houghton gives £2. Bring the Truth, GG Fighting Fund. And Wayne Veach gives $32.99 South African Rand. Thank you, Wayne. Steve gives 20 British pounds and says, I remember 20 years ago when I was young and stupid, I hated you, George. 20 years later, here's 20 quid. I love everything you do and have done. Steve, there is greater rejoicing in heaven when a sinner doth repent than when 99 who hath no need of repenting. And you know the rest, as Joe Biden would say. Thanks very much indeed. I love you. Kevin Bill gives £10 and says, worried about your blood pressure, George, but then if we're all going to get a factor 5 if we're all going to get a factor 5 million suntan, it won't matter, I guess. That's true, actually. I might as well start smoking cigars again. There's not long to go. Let me take a quick break and more calls right after this.
Gosh darn. How do you get this thing to work? Is it that one? Is it this one here? Gosh. Was this thing built in America? Jeez. Kamala, would you get in here? I can't get the, gosh darn wireless to work.
You know I can't answer questions, Joe, when I'm laughing.
I'm trying to, listen to that Scottish guy on the wireless, the Galloway fella.
Oh, Joe, you're so funny.
I've been pressing this red button on and off and on and off. Heck, I can't get it to work. Hello, Biden residence.
Mr. President, be advised, we have executed the airstrike on Syria. Confirmed.
That's just great. How long until it gets delivered? I'm starving.
Let's take a call. Go ahead, Kenny.
Hi, George. Yeah, I just want to talk about the trans issue that you were speaking about earlier.
Yeah,
I've
go
got a
ahead.
book in front of me by Douglas Murray, and he's got a paragraph here I'd just like to read out, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was standing on the corner at a quarter.
All right, I'll get him off. He's a nutter. He's a nutter. In the UK, it's 08081 965 522, and in the US, it's +1 844 944 3344.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Whatever happened to that Elvis guy, by the way? We haven't had a call from him for a long time. Did I ban him? If I did, let me summarily lift it. I remember just how funny he is hearing that jingle. Now, there's no point in plugging the mother of all talk shows roadshow in Stockport on the 7th of November because the tickets sold out weeks ago, more than a month before the show. So hard luck if you now decide that you would have liked to have gone. But you will be able to see some excerpts from it on the subsequent editions of the mother of all talk shows, because my good wife, Gayatri, with her red gloves, will be moving amongst the audience doing vox pops. She's looking surprised at me now because she doesn't know if she can find those red gloves. Those of you who've been watching us on television for many years will know the red gloves I mean. But you can buy lots of other things from the shop. In particular, the merchandise is going really well. We're moving out of t-shirt weather, but it's definitely polo shirt weather always, and hoodies and so on. They're rather nice. I tried to persuade Gayatri to model them, but she wouldn't do so, modesty being her strongest suit. But I might actually put up a picture of me, and I haven't been in a t-shirt in 50 years, but I'm the same weight I was 50 years ago, so maybe I should squeeze myself into one of those. Let's take a call from Jeff in Croydon. Go ahead, Jeff.
George, hello. Thank you for having me on. Great honor indeed.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
I'd just like to say, as I was saying to your researcher, I'd just like to shed a little bit of light on the whole Kirchbridge incident and the illusion, or well, it's not even an illusion. It was a terrorist attack, and I totally agree with you. And I'd just like to come from an angle that most people probably would not make the connection with, as to why myself, I definitely agree it was a terrorist attack, and you would pose that question too, whereas most people think you're absolutely crazy. But I just want to give a bit of background that might just confirm that it is.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we talk a lot about, the government's in power. We've got Zelensky, we've got all these characters floating around, and, there's all this there's a lot of focus upon the Azov battalion and the neo-Nazi element that everyone pushes to the side, very convenient, and says, well, Zelensky's a Jew. He can't be a neo-Nazi. This can't be happening, even though we've had plenty of reports from 2014 from, Channel 4, from all of the news media that reported this, but now suddenly, because we've got a Jewish president, that is not possible. So let's just look into that a little bit further. I'm going to try to be as quick as I can because I don't want to take up too much of your time, but didn't Hitler have 20 Jewish generals in his army, and 2 of his sword marshals were Jewish? Also, that's a fact. So people go and look that up when they would like to look at those things.
I don't think that is a fact. I'm going to stop you there. I don't think that is a fact at all, and I don't want to hear that kind of incendiary material, which is not factual, on the show. We don't want to hear from Jeff in Croydon anymore. Let's hear from Kevin in Suffolk. Go ahead, Kevin.
Hi, George. There's a couple of things I wanted to say. The first thing is I was very interested to find out that one of these pipelines is actually still functioning, and no one's actually said which one.
Yeah, me too, yeah.
Right. Well,
yeah, no, I don't know which one either.
Well, the point is, if it's Nord Stream 2, that is the new or singing or dancing one with a much bigger capacity and sort of a much improved pipeline. So it's going to be very strange if that's the only one that's functioning, when specifically the Americans didn't want that one activated. So if
no, they did bomb it. No, Kevin, they did bomb them both. It's just that they didn't bomb one of them well enough.
No, I get that. I completely get that.
It is operable, but they both were bombed.
No, I completely get that, George. What I'm saying is, if they failed with Nord Stream 2, it's going to blow up in their face because that's the one they specifically didn't want active.
Exactly.
Okay.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt you, Kevin, for a minute. It puts enormous pressure on Soldier Schultz in Berlin because his people are rising against the German government's policy. And whereas he would have been able to say, well, I can't actually now restart the Russian gas flow because somebody's blown up the pipelines. Now he can't say that. Last word to you, Kev.
Well, okay. I wanted to say quickly, because I'm very concerned. I mean, I think we're actually in as dangerous a situation. I was born 3 months before the Cuban Missile Crisis, so I don't remember it. So I can't actually say this is the most dangerous situation of my lifetime, but it's certainly the most dangerous I remember. And I just cannot, I've said to you before, and I follow the Duran, and those guys have actually been voicing criticisms of the Russian army. It's impossible to understand what the strategy is for somebody who believes in a multipolar world order. And, you know, I actually quite, you know, I listen to Putin speak, and I can't find too much fault in what he's got to say. But the point is, they're not following, or they don't seem to be following a strategy for victory. And my worry is they had the situation with Moskva, which, you know, it turns out, and Russian intelligence must have known well before we did, that the Americans supplied the weapons and the satellite intelligence for that operation. So effectively, the Americans sunk their flagship, and there's been no response to that. You know, I know the bridge bombing. Okay, it's not a big strategic victory, but it's very symbolic. The fact that they got through and bombed this thing that was, you know, a big symbol of the link between Russia and Crimea. There's all this stuff going on. My worry is that there is criticism building in Russia, and if there is a political collapse, that is about the only circumstance that I can see nukes being released. And if you respond to that,
if you mean Kevin, if you mean political criticism of Putin, as it were, from the liberal side, you're quite wrong. Russia has lost 250,000 Guardian reading progressive liberals who fled the country, even though none of them were ever going to be called up. But it has gained 8 million people from eastern Ukraine who actually want to be Russian. The main criticism of the Russian government is coming from those who cannot understand why Russia is fighting this war with one hand tied behind its back, tied up in legalisms, wearing velvet gloves. Russia could have ended all civil society in Ukraine in an afternoon. It could have put every light out. It could have cut off every power station. It could have destroyed every railway. Nothing would be able to move on any motorway, but it hasn't done any of those things. The things that we did within hours of our war that we launched against Iraq, for example. And that's what I think Putin will be responding to after tomorrow morning. Elvis is in the building, after all, but he wants a fight with me. Will I? Will I let Elvis back in? Do I need a fight? Do I need a fight? You bet I do. Elvis, get ready. But first, it's Gerard in Kilwinning. Go ahead, Gerard.
Hi, George. Great to be back on the show. I've tried to go on a few times in the last while, but it must be because you're, and genuinely, congratulations to you and the guys. It's really doing a great job, and I think the show's going from strength to strength over the last 2 years. You really are doing a great job, you and your team. So I just want to say that first of all. Yeah, I think you and the last caller kind of stole my thunder a little bit. But just the more general terms, right? When do the adults come back in the room regarding this situation? I mean, when and you heard Garland was talking about Biden saying, "Oh well, we're close to nuclear Armageddon." Well, you're the president of the biggest nuclear power in the world. What you're actually funding another country to kill the second biggest nuclear power in the world soldiers. So you are, by definition, killing Russian soldiers every single day. And I think you pointed out the point about Putin, George. In my opinion, he's actually been quite reserved as well and quite conservative how he's approached this war. My concern is, if, for example, there was a coup in Russia, who takes over? Is it some of these Russian generals who were in charge in Chechnya or in Syria? I mean, look at what they did there. So, in a way, it's kind of, for Putin, we're actually playing a bit safe. I would be really concerned about a nuclear exchange if he was to be off, as so many in the West seem to want to happen. Who takes over? It's going to be, who knows? That's the problem. It's better the devil you know, or rather than not. I'm really, really terrified of where this is going. And I really feel it's going to World War III, nuclear Armageddon, sooner than we think if we don't actually put a real stop to what we are doing in Ukraine.
Thanks for that. Very powerful call. The statement about nuclear Armageddon has not been walked back by Joe Biden, although he has refused all further questioning on it. His press secretary said you can email him, like he understands email or is capable of replying to emails. The phrase is, as you say, redolent of doom. If you are the president of the biggest nuclear power on the earth, and you're in a war, no point in pretending otherwise, you're in a war by proxy, but also by your own forces and weapons and so on, with the second biggest nuclear power, to say other than that we are in real danger of a nuclear war breaking out in Europe is to be an ostrich. It's to bury your head in the sand. Speaking of which, let's go to Kenny in Acton if he's there. Come on, Kenny. Come and have a go, Kenny, if you think you're hard enough. Come on, Kenny. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. While we're waiting for him to gird his loins, let's go to Fundamentals in Southend-on-Sea. Welcome, Fundamentals.
Hello, George. Thanks for taking me call again. It's good to hear your voice. George, I could talk to you on a number of things. I could talk about Ukraine. I'm desperately in need to have a great conversation about Trump. We disagree on a lot of things on that. But I've got a question for you, George. I've been asking a lot of people over the last 2 years. Nobody has been able to stop me. Now, the UK government run the benefit system online. To sign into your account, they send you a verification code on your cell phone, on your device. It's safe. It hasn't been hacked, and it hasn't even been attempted to be hacked. Now, this is the question, George. Why can't one person, one vote online on all democratic issues, reducing the government? Because right now, we've got psychopaths who practice in dishonesty before they practice in truth. Dishonesty is destroying democracy. The guy there who you said, John Murphy.
Well, look, it's a very good point. I'm cutting you short only because of the hour, but you'll get another chance on Wednesday. It's a very good point. The ancient method of a wet Thursday, going down to a school to put a paper ballot in a box is just that. It's an ancient policy that I believe has passed its sell-by date. So there's every reason to make the argument for more referendums, which can be operated, as you say, online, with the opportunity, of course, to get a paper ballot if, like Joe Biden, you're not capable of operating a computer. Then you can deal with all kinds of big issues in that way. I don't think that the day will ever come where every matter of public policy would be so decided. But this one, for example, should we be sending money and weapons and training to Ukraine? Yes or no? Vote online or at your school, your workplace, your supermarket, your church, your mosque, your football club, etc. Why not? That sounds to me like a huge step forward for democracy. Kenny's on the line. I'm glad to hear. Welcome back, Kenny. What would you like to say?
Good evening, George. Now, don't take it personally that I'm going to disagree with you on something here, okay? You lost your temper at me the last two times we spoke and had a disagreement. It's nothing personal. You know, I have my own points of view on certain things. I understand you're a lot more researched than me, but I just wanted to ask you your thoughts. Here's my opinion, right? Vladimir Putin is losing the war. And 300,000 people have fled Italy. 300,000 fighting-age men have tried to flee over the border. Vladimir Putin's locked the borders to stop any more people leaving. He's then resorted to a dad's army-style recruitment to try and get older men to join the army. I think the guy is losing, I seriously do. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that you should stop reading the Sunday Post. A man of your age should have moved on by now. None of those things that you have just said is true. And if the Russians are losing the war, how come 25% of Ukraine just left Ukraine and voted in overwhelming numbers, in lines of voters, laughing and smiling as they did so, with not a gun in sight, except Ukrainian bombs falling on them from time to time, overwhelmingly to leave Ukraine. So Russia just inherited 8 million new Russians. And you're going to find out tomorrow what the Russian response to the bombing of the Kerch is. There are not 300,000 Russians in Italy. The borders of Russia are not locked. Anyone who wants to leave Russia can leave. 250,000 have left. Most of them have gone to Georgia, to Kazakhstan, to Turkey, and to Serbia. The numbers of reservists that are being called up are not older men. They're men on the active reserve list, and you're going to see them in action, Kenny. You need to stop reading propaganda. I thought you'd do better than that. But there's a legend on the line. Clear the decks. It's Norma in Bristol. Go ahead, Norma.
Hello, George. It's a bit flippant, really. A long time
Okay,
ago, I learned
that's
a
what we
bit of
need at this
Russian.
time of night.
Well, I
Okay.
learned this. I had a boyfriend who was an Iraqi student about 65 years ago, and he taught me a bit of Russian. Now, sounds a bit weird. What I wanted to do was, about your show, can I just quote 3 little tiny bits and see if you understand it? You probably will. So, can I quote it? Yeah?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well,
There's lots
is
of
the
Russian
first.
speakers listening to this.
This is the first one. Ya Libiala Blue, and it's about your show. And then I say to you, Spasibo and do svidaniya. Now, do you know what I said?
Well, thank you. Thank you and goodbye. If I knew any Russian, I'd have to kill you if I admitted it. I know no Russian. I
You got that
am
right.
not a Russian.
You got that right.
I know. There's no Russians behind me. There's no Russians working me. There's no Russians telling me what to do, and never have attempted to tell me what to do. But I'll tell you what, Norma, like you, I love to hear the Russian language, even if it is spoken by an Iraqi, which is a great story in itself. I hope your husband's not upset at you talking about this ex-boyfriend, but it was 65 years ago. The Russian culture, the Russian people, but above all, the Russian contribution to the defeat of fascism and the beast of Hitlerism in the rubble of Berlin in May of 1945, all ensure them a very comfortable place right in the center of my heart. I'm not affiliated to the Russian state media. I'm not paid by Russia, but I do support the unity, the integrity, and the dignity of the Russian people. And I believe that those are at an all-time high, certainly in the post-Soviet period. And I believe that the reason for that is the presidency of Vladimir Putin. As I have said many times, Norma, I wouldn't have been voting for him if I'd been a Russian at the last election. But I'll tell you what, I'd vote for him at the next election, because I think that he has emerged for the vast majority of people in the world, remembering that only 13% of the people of the world are Westerners like you and me. The great majority of the world sees Russia, sees Putin as standing up to the bullies, the colonizers, the imperialists, the slavers, the people that took their countries hostage and dragged their people across the seas for profit as slaves, and who have invaded virtually every country in the world, while Russia and even China more particularly have invaded nobody. I believe that this war was forced on Russia, that these people, as I said earlier, in eastern Ukraine are Russian and have now come home. All of these views I have freely and independently formed in my own mind and heart. Nobody paid me to, nobody rented me to. In fact, those views are entirely consistent across all of my life. And if people don't like it, I'm sorry, I'm not one of those that says things in order to be liked. I'm not someone who says things in order to get votes. I tell people what I truly feel. And what I truly feel, Norma, is that you are a legend, a Russian-speaking legend. I hope you've not got any snow on your boots. I hope you've not got any snow on your boots and a wee vodka there in front of you, because people will be getting suspicious. Well, look, that's all I've got time for. I always like to end the show with Norma's dulcet tones and revelations about her love life 65 years ago. But here's the good news. I'll be back again with the second half of the show on Wednesday. The midweek mother of all talk shows begins on Wednesday at 9 p.m. UK time. All singing, all dancing. Be there or be square.